you got to drop one of those math courses and throw this financial literacy course in there in substitute of the in substitute of the math course. It just makes sense. Those skill set, the kid is not going to use the Pythagorean theory ever again in life. I've never used the Pythagorean theory, trigonometry, all of these things that I've learned. I can tell you that I have consistently used my bank account. I've consistently used my budgeting skills, and I've consistently had to use and understand filing taxes and investing money. People's voice. Welcome back. Welcome back. This is the People's Voice. I am Trey Evans, and I am the People's Voice. Thank you again for checking out the podcast this week. As always, it is greatly appreciated. As always, thank you to everyone who's taken some time out today to check out the podcast, whatever time of day you're listening to it. We appreciate you taking the time to check us out. Hopefully, as always, we want this information to be enlightening, be able for you to apply it and share it. So if this information that we are providing is of benefit to you and you see it may be benefit to others, please feel free to subscribe to the podcast so you can be notified when the new podcast drops, which is every Friday. And then you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we drop the video for the podcast every Friday at 3 p.m. But again, we appreciate all the support, and thank you again for taking time to listen to the podcast today. Okay, great. So today I want to talk about a topic that I think, once again, I think all my topics that we cover here are relatable, but some more than others. Well, in this particular case, I think this is one that everyone can at least understand. If not understand, definitely want to see the fruits of this. And what I'm talking about today, I know I'm teasing you guys. What I'm talking about today is financial literacy, and not just financial literacy in terms of financial literacy just for adults. I'm specifically talking about financial literacy for kids, especially high school students. And I'm talking about this today because recently a few pretty large states have begun the process to start requiring high school students to complete a financial literacy course as a requirement for graduation. And that's key information, and I'll explain as I go a little bit further, but as a requirement for graduation from high school. And so today what I want to do is talk about that process, talking about financial literacy at the high school level, also discuss some of the current states here in the United States that already require it, some of the states that offer it, and kind of just give some of the positive and some surprisingly negative feedback about financial literacy for in high school, and also kind of break down what those benefits are, and of course offer some recommendations on how you can implement that yourself in your home or in your community or within your network. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. Today I'm talking about financial literacy in high schools here in the United States. So as always, when I start these topics, not always, but often, I like to give a definition first. The definition allows for a foundation, so then we can, continue the conversation from there. So let me give a definition of what financial literacy is, because that, I think, is key information, because you would be surprised about how many individuals truly don't understand what financial literacy actually is. And sometimes you might hear a term and, it may sometimes sound daunting, but it's really very simple once I give the definition. So, definition of financial literacy, and I'm getting this from RamseySolutions.com. And here they have it defined as financial literacy is the personal finance knowledge and skills you need to handle your money well. Skills like how to budget, how to save for emergencies, how to manage debt, get out of debt, and of course, how to build wealth for the future. So, in a nutshell, it's just the personal finance knowledge and skills you need to know how to handle your money well. Now, this is key information, right? Because again, financial literacy oftentimes is learned on the fly. Now, how we break this is through education and educating our students at a much younger age. And that's what I want to talk about today, and talk about some of the programs that have been put forth and some of the initiatives that are currently in place and are forwardly in motion. Because again, financial literacy, as I said, this personal testimony, I was able to have be financially literate to a degree, right? Because, and I'm talking about as a child, right? My dad was, especially as I got into high school in my later years, was good at kind of explaining the cost of things, right? And I've told a story a million times where I wanted to get a pair of sneakers, and we went to the sneaker store, and I won't talk what brand it was, but it was an expensive sneaker at the time. And I said, I picked up the sneaker, and my dad looked at me and said, okay, well, this is the sneaker you want? And I'm like, yeah. And now at the time, I played basketball in high school. So he was like, oh, so you're going to play basketball in these? And I'm like, no, I'm just going to wear those. Those you can't play basketball in those. You wear those. And I remember him looking at me, with the dog head, saying, what? I'm not paying that type of money for you to just walk around in a pair of shoes. And, just keep in mind, I'm 16, 17 years old. I'm shocked right now. I'm not, we didn't grow up wealthy, but we grew up, middle class, upper middle class, but it was still a shock to me that this man was telling me that I couldn't get these sneakers. And I said to him, well, it's not like we don't have the money. And I remember the look on his face when he said, no, we don't have the money. I have the money, and I'm not spending my money on these sneakers. Anyway, I tell that story because that was kind of my initiation into financial literacy, because after that, he began to explain, hey, these things cost money, and, I'm paying for this, this, and this. So financial literacy, going back, I know I jumped off the cliff there a little bit, but going back to financial literacy and the importance of teaching it young is because later on in life, this is a skill set that's going to be applied for the rest of your life. If anything else in your life, you will at some point have to use a financial literacy skill. So let me talk about that today, talking about financial literacy in high schools. So currently here in the United States, there are about 27 states, okay, that offer financial literacy education or courses to public high school students. And I'm emphasizing public high school students because, most of my research was done on public high schools. I'm sure that private high schools and other religious high schools and schools offer or may offer these, but just today, so we're clear, I'm talking about public high schools here in the United States. So currently, it's estimated about 27 states, I should say, require high school students, 27 states offer financial literacy education and courses to their students. Now, out of that 27, only 17 actually mandate it or have it as a requirement for graduation. And that is states that have put the legislation to vote. It's been voted on, and now it's become an act or a law for the state. Now, here's the thing. Even though it's 17 states that are now going to require high school students to pass a course on financial literacy in order to graduate, like this is a requirement. Out of the 17 states, currently only 8 have programs that are fully implemented and in process of providing that information. And so I want to talk about that as I go through here. I'm going to break down the states that are currently doing it, and then the states that are have created programs and are in the process of implementing them into the school system, into the curriculum, things of that nature. So 17 states currently have the requirement for, or are working on the requirement for high school, and even in some states it's middle school, but graduating, before you graduate high school, a requirement to have financial literacy. So let's talk about first the 9 states that have begun the implementation process, or in the process of beginning to implement this as a permanent process, a permanent course in their states. So you have 9. You have Florida, you have Nebraska. Now, Florida is huge because Florida is, one of the largest states in the country, and their program goes into effect this coming school year in 2023. Now, this legislation was voted on last year, but it actually gets implemented this year, I believe, beginning with the 2023, the fall of 2023 class. Matter of fact, let me play this clip from Matt Wilhite, who is a representative from Florida. And he talked about this on CBS News. And so let me play this and then we'll go from there.
Well, hello, and thank you for having me. Obviously, the financial literacy of our children and their future is very beneficial. And so this is offering to take a half a credit from their electives and make it a full required class for any of our students. And so there's support because we recognize how important it is to make sure that kids understand the value of money and what it's used for, and make sure they're stable and they can, when they're working or buy a home or things like that, that they'll understand the value of the dollar.
So that was, again, Rep. Matt Wilhite from Florida. And as you heard him state there, it's really about teaching them about the value of a dollar in the high schools, because again, once they leave high school, they get into the real world, they start getting jobs. So understanding how to manage money becomes very important. But I'll get a little bit more into that in terms of what the curriculum looks like. But as you heard, Florida, as I said, will be implementing that this year, coming in fall of 2023. And it's a major victory for those who have advocated for financial literacy, because Florida is one of the largest states in terms of population and high school students in the United States. But going back, so I know I digressed a little bit. So we have 17 states that are currently on board to either that are providing financial literacy courses for high school students as a requirement, or they're on board. The ones that are beginning the implementation or rolling out the program, you have Florida, Nebraska, Rhode Island, you have Georgia, Michigan, South Carolina, New Hampshire, and Kansas. And New Hampshire and Kansas have recently been added, I think, in the last 6 months. So this is all still fresh and very new. Now, the 8 states that are currently already offering and have implemented requirements for graduation, and this is key. This is why I keep emphasizing this, because even as you do your own research, hopefully after you listen to this, you'll see reports saying, oh, it's 20, 30 states offer high school students financial literacy. No, there's a difference between offering them and making it a requirement. So that's why I'm emphasizing it. So the 9 that I just mentioned, they are in the process of implementing that. A lot of those come on board this coming fall, or even in 2024, they begin to require students to have that as a graduation requirement. The 8 states that have currently already implemented this and have this rolling in their high school curriculum, and also is state mandated, you have Alabama, Mississippi, Missouri, Ohio, North Carolina, Tennessee, Utah, and Virginia. So those are the 8 states that currently already have programs in place, and it's a requirement for education for high school students to graduate. And I failed to mention, I'm getting this information regarding the states that have already started these programs from Next Gen Personal Finance, which if you want to really look up and get some more detailed information about this, you can definitely check out their site. It's not a paid advertisement or anything like that. But they did a great breakdown in terms of the states, the programs that are being offered. I mean, it really goes in depth. So it's great information, but I just wanted to mention that's where I was getting it from. But going back, so as you heard the rep mention from Florida, one of the great aspects of this, in my opinion, is that the course is being required. The course for financial literacy is a requirement. Now, it takes away from a credit, or half a credit, as the rep mentioned, from an elective. And this is in Florida. Every state is different. It takes away about a half a credit. So, some of the concern is, well, you're taking away from a course that maybe a child could utilize to increase their imagination. It might spark something, which is understood. But the fact that it's actually a credit that is required is the difference between successfully going through this program and having it being used as just another a course that doesn't have any type of requirements to it. But going back, so I mentioned those states, those 8 states that currently fully have programs in place and implemented. I want to go through a little bit about what those programs look like, and then I'll talk a little bit about some of the challenges that have been, or some of the concerns that have been raised as a result of financial literacy at the high school level. So first of all, Utah was the first state in the United States to offer or to require financial literacy in the high schools. I'm reading here from RamseySolutions.com. It says back in 2003, Senate Bill 154 was signed into law requiring 1 semester of financial literacy course for graduation. And then, the next year after that, or a few years after that, the Utah State Board approved 1 semester. They called the class General Financial Literacy, and it began implementing it with the 2008 graduating class. And currently it says, to this day, as I mentioned, every high school student in Utah has to take a half a credit of the financial literacy class. So I wanted to point that out. Utah was the first state to actually in the United States to require all high school students to have a financial literacy course. And look, again, there's 8 other states. You have Alabama. I just mentioned Florida. Georgia has a great program as well. And most of these states require at least a half credit. The course is worth half of a credit in terms of requirement for graduation, which is great. You have Iowa, Michigan, Mississippi as well. Now, Mississippi requirements is that, and I'm reading here again from Ramsey.com, this began in 2022. And now in Mississippi, they're required that students take not only just a financial class, but they take a year-long college and career readiness course to graduate. Now, within that course, financial literacy is packed in that. So not only are they preparing you from a career standpoint, but they're also providing financial literacy within the course. So it's kind of packaged in. So that way it's kind of a year-long course that provides you with other essential skills, skill sets regarding financial literacy. And then last but not least, and I mentioned them before, but I also want to talk about Rhode Island because Rhode Island is going to begin theirs in 2024. Now, the thing about Rhode Island is not only making it a course, but you also have to have other requirements to prove that you have actually gained the knowledge. So to demonstrate proficiency, students in Rhode Island, high school graduating students in Rhode Island, starting in the graduating class of 2024, they'll have to not only take the course, but they have to pass a they have to pass the course, of course. They have to pass the course, of course. They have to pass the course. They have to complete a project. They have to pass an assessment, and then they may have to complete some other requirements as well to prove that, hey, this information that we've gone through for this course, we are retaining it, and we can apply it because we've actually, had to pass an assessment that says that we've retained this information. So, all positive stuff, right? And I want to get all the positive stuff out first, right? Now, some of the challenges, right? With all things, there are going to be some challenges. First of all, even though I mentioned that, 17 states have it or will have it as a requirement eventually, there is a breakdown when it comes to financial literacy in schools based on race and income. And this is one of the challenges that needs to be overcome. So I'm reading here from the Next Gen Personal Finance. And again, like I said, they did an annual report where they broke this down. They did a great job. And they have here listed access of Black and brown students who basically live in states or go to schools where financial literacy is a requirement for graduation. And it says here in schools that are 75% populated with Black and brown students, those schools, it's only 1 in 20 students will be guaranteed, or 1 in 20 students will be in schools that require financial literacy for graduation, compared to schools that have less than 25% Black and brown children. Those schools, predominantly schools that are in white neighborhoods, those students, 1 in 7 of those students will go to schools that have or require a financial literacy course as a requirement for graduation. So we have disparities there that have to be addressed, right? Because, again, a lot of this, you have to understand, a lot of this is new because in terms of the states, like the 2018, just to give you an understanding, 2018, only 5 states had a personal finance or a financial literacy requirement for high school graduating students in 2018. Now we're in 2023. We have almost 17 states that are either on board or in the process of implementing that in the next few years. So it's still relatively new. I mean, we're talking only 5 years ago, there was only 5 states, and now we're up to 17. But still, I wanted to mention that disparity because it's important that these programs are adequately rolled out to all high school students and not just to schools in well-to-do areas or predominantly white areas, because Black and brown children also need financial literacy education, and it should be a requirement. Last but not least, as I was saying, also in terms of the financial, in terms of from an economic standpoint, there's disparities as well. In schools where it's 75% or more that the students are on free or reduced lunch, or they receive free and reduced lunch, those high schools, only 1 in 20 students will go through a course, a financial literacy course that requires them to take it before they graduate, compared to schools with 25% or less students that are on free and reduced lunch. In those schools, 1 in 8 students will go to a school that requires financial literacy as a requirement. So I just wanted to point that out because I thought that was important. Now, some of the other challenges or some of the other concerns that have come up in terms of providing financial literacy in schools. Now, there are tons and tons of debates and articles about what class do you remove. As you heard the rep for Florida say, you know, you're going to take away from an elective. Many individuals, and including myself, let me throw myself in there, I say let's do away with, you know, the majority of the math that is given in high school, right? And I know the math and the STEM people are throwing rocks at their phone or however you're listening to me or watching me right now. But I'm telling you, there is, you know, in the United States, just for those who may not know, I know we have a lot of people in education that listen, basically math, right? They have what they call the geometry algebra sandwich. And basically, once a child gets in the 8th, 9th grade, I think they take algebra 1 and they do geometry, and then they do another algebra on the way out. So it's basically 4 or 5 courses somewhere in that, and they may do trigonometry and some other things, Pythagorean theory and things of that nature. I can tell you, as someone who went through public school education, that I've never used it. Never used it. Matter of fact, there was a poll was done a few years back by H&R Block. They surveyed 2,000 adults, and 84% of the people that they polled said that they never used the information that they learned in school once they became adults. 84% after graduation never used most of the information or the things that they were taught. Now think about all the things that you're taught in high school: social studies, history, shop class, depending on, you know, what school you went to. Now, don't get me wrong. You know, I know that there are people that go on to become social studies teachers and history teachers and historians and mathematicians, and that's great. But for the majority of people, this skill set is not going to be used. So what I was going to say was, I would suggest that let me not get into that. I'll get to that before I end. But I just wanted to point that out, that 84% of people, this is a survey done by H&R Block of 2,000 adults, said that on average they haven't used any of these skill sets after they graduated, especially in their jobs, because most people, the knowledge that they gain is from on the job, as opposed to what they could teach you in school. But let me get back. So some of the other challenges or some of the other concerns that have been raised. Some people have argued that personal finance education doesn't change the conditions, right? They say, well, you can teach all you want, but people are going to spend, people are going to be people, you know, those type of individuals. Well, that, you know, education of any kind, especially the education that you're going to utilize for the rest of your life, I can't see how that is going to be a detraction at all. Some other concerns that people have raised, they say personal finance education isn't a quick fix, and it's not, right? It's something that you instill and then you'll apply it and have to rely back to it at some point. But as long as you have it, that's the point. They're saying that there's no room in the curriculum, as you heard from the rep in Florida. They're going to have to take away a half a credit from an elective. But I mean, if that means taking away from the shop class, okay. Even the mechanics needs to know how to balance a checkbook and how to pay for his mortgage or her mortgage as they move forward. The two biggest ones, I think, is inadequate resources, because even though a lot of these programs get mandated or these programs get voted on, they don't always have the financial resources, because the state has to then fund these programs in order to make sure that they have the curriculum that's needed, that they have the proper education for the teachers or the individuals that are going to provide it, and then the materials as well. So funding has become a huge issue, because in some states it has become up almost as a campaign promise, and then it falls on deaf ears even after it gets passed, because it's never funded by the states. And then last but not least, some people say it's inconsistent in terms of the standards, which part of this, it has to be mandated and it has to be consistent. Just like you have all of these other consistencies and standardized testing in education, financial literacy has to have that same formula and requirement as well. Once implemented in the states, it has to be consistent, and that's why it should be rolled out on a federal basis. In terms of the programs themselves, what does the curriculum look like? The curriculum should have budgeting in there. It should have an understanding of how your credit works, bank fees, how to balance a bank account. Which you'd be surprised. Money comes in, money goes out, and people don't even think twice about it. It should definitely have how to file your taxes. There was in that same H&R Block poll that I mentioned, I forgot the number, but it's a high number of individuals who do not know how to file their own taxes, which, I mean, you can definitely do it yourself. I've done my own taxes for 30 years now. So, I mean, please, take the time for yourself so you can understand, what you're paying, why you're paying it, and then, go on from there. But I'll move on from there. And then investment basics. How to invest your money, understanding that your money is not just to spend. Your money is for you to then make your money work for you. And, I won't get too much further into that, but these are the basics that should be in the curriculum. And this is why this push has begun. And I'm firmly on board with supporting this. Next Gen Personal Finance did a great job. If you want to look it up, check out their report. They did a great breakdown on high schools and offering financial literacy in high schools. As I was saying before I stopped, in terms of the math courses, I think that you got to drop one of those math courses and throw this financial literacy course in there in substitute of the substitute of the math course. It just makes sense. Those skill set, the kid is not going to use the Pythagorean theory ever again in life. I've never used the Pythagorean theory, trigonometry, all of these things that I've learned. I can tell you that I have consistently used my bank account. I've consistently used my budgeting skills, and I've consistently had to use and understand filing taxes and investing money. And that has been since the day I entered the workforce. And so I recommend and strongly recommend that if your state is not providing that literacy in the high schools or at the state level, you begin those conversations with your local reps, your senators, your state senators, to find out how, and your Board of Education people, because in some states, even though it's not required from a state level, there are school districts that offer it in their schools. So, you can definitely make the push as well. And there's a ton of free literacy courses out there as well for K through 12 and even high school students, a ton of them. As a matter of fact, I'll put the links on my social media, and I'll also put that in the description as well on the podcast and the video, so you can link to those as well if you want to begin the process. But again, huge push. Let's make this push for those who do not have it in their states. Make it known that you want it in your states. You want it for your children. For the states that have it, make sure you're monitoring it. You're monitoring what level of financial literacy is being provided. Make sure that it is going to be beneficial for the growth of the student from an intellectual standpoint when it comes to financial literacy. So that's what I wanted to talk about today, everyone. So financial literacy in high school is very important. It must be a requirement. It must be a requirement in all states. And I applaud all of the states that have taken the time to this point to implement this as a requirement in their education system. Great job. So I hope this information was informative and enlightening. As always, if you want to leave a comment, you can reach me on my socials. You can reach me at I am Trey Evans. That's on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You could also reach us at the show Instagram, which is the People's Voice Podcast on Instagram. Please leave a comment, share your thoughts, and all comments are welcome and appreciated. So as always, I appreciate your time today. Dreams are not just for sleeping. Please wake up and live your dreams. My name is Trey Evans, the People's Voice. Tell somebody about the dream. Salute. People's Voice.